All right, welcome back, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started here. My name's Tim Mangan, Team Merchant Technologies. I recognize a lot of faces that are in here. And my job is to make Microsoft look good with MSIX, I suppose. I guess that's a better job description I've used in the past. I used to have a description like for my mother and her friends. She's like, what do you do? I was like, well, I fix Microsoft's bugs. How's that? That works. They understood that one. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about MSIX and whether or not it's ready. Again, a lot of questions on that this year. But before I start, Microsoft doesn't really come out and talk anymore to the IT pros about this space. They used to come to this conference. They're really not. They sort of ceded that efforts out to their network of vendor partners that are out there to help you with products to solve your problems with applications. So we really do need to talk a little bit about why we do things like packaging and MSIX. I have a great story to share from a training class we held earlier this year. So I'm not going to mention any names, but it was a large organization in the financial services market, and their job was basically to do regulation on a daily basis of the markets that are out there. And we were doing a training class teaching them how to do MSIX packaging. And I had a class of 17 people in there. I'd actually worked with the director at another company earlier. I trained his staff on AppV packaging in the years back, and they were ready at this organization to make that transition. He was brand new in the organization, brought me in, and he wanted me to train everybody because he was also using it as a little bit of evaluation to figure out who knows their stuff and who doesn't on my team. So we get into the class, and on the second day, he steps out first thing in the morning, takes a phone call. And after a few minutes, he comes back in and he says, hey, we're going to have to put a pause on the training. We have an IT fire to put out. And all the people in the company who actually have a chance to solve this problem are here in the room. So we took about a 2-hour break. We played a little bit of solitaire, things like that while we were waiting. And then they came back and the problem was solved. So what happened in this problem? Well, the IT organization, or the desktop engineering organization, was responsible for preparing and delivering all of the applications in the company, except for one. They had a big Citrix farm. And in that morning, the app that everybody in that company needed to do regulation was down. This team was responsible for delivering that app. They had a big Citrix environment there. People started looking immediately at Citrix because that must be Citrix, and Citrix very quickly. Those guys said, nope, it's got to be the network. Network guys took a quick look, said, nope, our network's just running just fine. Got to be the back-end database. Nope, everything's good there. Everything got dumped on the packaging team. You guys must have done something. Of course, they hadn't touched the app. Right? So in the end of the day, what really happened here? Well, at the end of the day, there was one application that team didn't have control over, and that was the browser. This was a browser-based web app that it was an in-house application that they had developed. They had a big team of developers, and it ran through this browser. And the browser updated overnight because it was not controlled by IT. It was just allowed to take its updates from the browser vendor when they appeared, and there was a backward compatibility. Apparently, there had been an agreement between the previous IT director and the developers that the developers would always take the beta version of the browser and test it before they actually did the final release. The guy who used to do that work was no longer there. So nobody was doing that testing anymore. And so they had this huge outage that was of critical importance to them. And this is why companies, particularly larger companies, want to have things like change control so that they can go and make sure that they can keep things operational, and yet they still need the ability to move things along. Right? One of the worst things about change control I see in large organizations, it just becomes the answer no. Right? There you got 5 people that all have an ability to just say no to anything, and they seem to just want to do it all the time. Right? And that's change control done wrong. But we do need to have some level of change control so that we don't have to be putting out these fires. Oh, by the way, I asked AI to help me create this image. And apparently AI has no idea how to put out an IT fire either. So, all right. So why do we like MSIX? Well, the first thing is that it gives us this clean installation and uninstallation. Right? When I drop that thing down, if I need to take it off, my machine's perfectly clean and back to where it was. But also, I have a guarantee that dropping that application on will not harm any other application running on that box, and it will not harm the operating system itself. And those are two very key attributes that we like with not only MSIX, but a number of the different packaging technologies that we have out there. The second reason is that bad things can happen. So I put out a question on LinkedIn last week, trying to come up with the right word for what I want here. And risky-ware ended up being the winner. But there were some really good other terms that came out of there, like beware, or the other one was, oh no, where. I like that one too. But there's all this software that you are getting from these third-party organizations that you're installing into your environment. And it's really a question of how many people can you trust? Okay, we have to trust Microsoft. I mean, we really have no choice about that. If you're up on AWS, you're trusting those guys, right? If you're on Google Cloud, you're weird, but okay, you're trusting them. But all of these applications are other vendors that you're trusting. And you have to try to limit how much you're trusting so many of these organizations. And it's not necessarily even them, because each of these applications are built on frameworks like the VC runtimes or the .NET frameworks that Microsoft is patching with security updates every single month. These things have vulnerabilities in them. So even if the application is written well, they're lying on top of some things that have potential CVEs in them and that you need to be able to pay attention to. So one of the reasons we like MSIX is the isolation that we get. Windows originally, the security model was horrible. Like you had only one user and he could do anything he wanted. Right? And we got the separation in the rings, so we got kernel and user mode, and then we got different users, and then when Vista came along, we got that temporary elevation thing, that UAC prompt, to help cut down the amount of exposure that you would have with someone having those admin rights, and limiting them as much as you could in terms of what they can do. Isolating at the application level is that next step of having every application separated out to limit what can happen. Now, we can take software like Java. I'll see companies that have, like, their HR site is on is horribly old. It needs version 1.7 of Java, and it will not work with anything newer. So they have to have that available, or the employees can't get at their benefits. So we want to run that in this application isolated environment, so that they will get a shortcut. They'll see the browser, but all of the Chrome of the browser is gone. They can't go to their favorites. They can't browse to other places. The only thing they can do is that one HR app from that browser, and that's the browser where we put Java in. Right? We also have the concept of if something bad happened inside that running application because of one of these CVEs that are in there, the odds of it getting out and getting to the other things are diminished. Now, it's not zero. It's not even close to zero. But it will usually end up interfering with the ability to spread once those things gets in. So getting that level of isolation becomes very important. Now, both of these two things I just talked about, we had in Microsoft AppV. We have them here in MSIX. If you look at using app layering products, they'll do a lot of the first part, not so much this. Right? And that's why we want MSIX, to be able to get these full benefits as the best way to deliver, prepare and deliver the applications in our environments. So AppV is going away, right? And in case there's anyone that hasn't heard that news, April 2026, Microsoft stops the security fixes to the desktop client that's built into Windows 10 and 11. Server 2025, it's in there, and it has that 5x5 support, so we're not exactly sure what the real end date's going to be, and are they not really going to do security fixes to the client version if they have to do it to the server version? Seems a little questionable, but anyone who is on AppV today, they really need to be in a mode of starting to get off of it if they haven't started that process. So a friend of mine challenged to tweet this thing out. So I put together this diagram and said, hey, the longer it's going to take you, the more expensive it's going to get, buddy. So that got some traction. But Matt Balzan, by the way, is Matt here? Matt usually comes to this conference. I haven't seen him yet. Oh, Matt's not here. So Matt had asked the question, though, where are we in terms of closing that compatibility gap between AppV and MSIX? So I do want to address that question that's here. And I've been talking about this for a long time at this conference. This is a slide from 2018, which is the year that Microsoft released MSIX. They came to this conference. They were very proud of this new thing that they were putting out. But I had been working with the pre-release versions for over 8 months, and I came here and I said two things. I said, one, I believe this technology is the future for applications going forward. It is going to take over. It is going to win. We are going to replace the MSIs with this over time. But number two, this ain't ready. This is not ready for prime time. You do not want to go and think about taking your entire application portfolio and bringing in an MSIX, because if you try that project, you are going to fail. Like, I had a company that was here at the conference. They still wanted me to come in and train their people. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that, not this year. The following year, we did do it. And that organization has been very successful with their packaging efforts. They had about 750 applications. I saw them 2 years ago, and they had almost everyone running in MSIX. I think they must have some phenomenal people to be that successful, quite frankly, but they were able to do that. So that's been kind of the problem. Now, this was the PS before we had the package support framework that was really usable. It existed. Microsoft created this utility to help these packages, software that we want to run inside of MSIX, called the Package Support Framework. It was an open source thing. They had created the initial version, but for you to use it at this time frame meant that you needed to download the source code from GitHub, pull out your Visual Studio skills, and build your own version and include it in the packages. And that just wasn't anything that anyone was going to do. So in the following year, I created a tool called PSF Tooling that did a lot of that work for you, and we were able to start bringing the PSF into the package. So what's the PSF do? Well, basically, the application has to make some calls into the operating system to get access to files and registries and all sorts of things like that. And we just drop in a component in the middle that intercepts those calls and changes the nature of those calls so that it'll work properly inside the container. And the PSF is built on detours. It's the same technology that AppV used to do its intercepts. And there are a number of other third-party vendors that have some products that do intercepts that are based off of detours as well. This is from my 2019 presentation. This is when we first started bringing in the PSF. And I said, hey, look, we're doing some good things. We can now get 20% of the applications up, more than double. Woohoo! But what we were finding was that we could identify things that needed the PSF. And when I added those things in and fixed it, the app still didn't work because there were more things behind there that we weren't fixing. We were only seeing the tip of the iceberg of the problem with the application, and there was a lot more work to be done. And so we started doing that work. This is from 2021. We got ourselves to almost 60% application compatibility. Now, the numbers that you see here are very specific numbers in that this is not, I can package it up, I can launch the app, the GUI comes up, and I don't see any errors on the screen. This is the full UAT test that you would run. My criteria in developing these numbers is if the user had the MSI or original version of that product installed on their system and you replace it with this package, could they notice the difference? If the answer is no, that's the only time it fit into that green category. Now, there could be some things in the blue and yellow here that are a little more subjective. The main features are working, but there are a few things that are just a little off. You're missing that right-click context menu was a great example in this time frame. And so you might find that package acceptable, you might not. All right, but that's the way we did those numbers. This is a different chart that I've used here in the past. And I really like this chart. And it looks nice and scientific, but it's just Tim drawing on a piece of paper, okay? There's no real data behind it, but I think it's pretty accurate, and I've gotten a lot of feedback that it does. The red line represents MSI repackaging. We've been doing this for years and years and years. And you can do most of the apps. Actually, you can do all of the apps with it, but not necessarily for all of the scenarios. You wouldn't use that MSI installer in a non-persistent VDI or on an RDS server where you have lots of users coming in. You usually don't do those there unless every user is getting that app. But the thing with the MSI curve is that that assumes someone has about 5 years packaging experience to be able to do that. Because you got to be able to do that cleanup properly, and you just need experience to be able to do that work. And that's why it takes a while to get these packages out, is because they still have to go through that process. Now with AppV had that isolation environment, so we're actually not worried about doing that type of cleanup work in there, so it could happen much faster. But AppV was also built in with a lot of remediation for things where the vendor had written the app for an older version of the OS and you're running on the newer version, and it would just take care of a lot of that stuff automatically. But there were some apps we couldn't do with AppV. Right? The equivalent number that I have for AppV in terms of application compatibility is 97%. We do most of them. But there were a few that we couldn't do, and you have to do it another way. In fact, there really is no technology out there that can do 100% of all of the applications. I get this question from customers all the time, particularly it's like the mid-level manager and says, well, we want to do 100% of our applications with this. No, you're not going to. You're going to have to pick a primary one that you want to use and try to work with that one, and when that doesn't work, then you're going to have to go to your backup. So, this is where MSIX was, and this was the 2019 version of this, right? There are some apps that are pretty good apps. You just put them in the Microsoft packaging tool, boom, 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 click, 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 you're done, boom, it's great. But that's the 13%. Was my number on that. If there was a problem, you then had to take that package, run it on a system with something like Process Monitor to figure out why it wasn't working, and then you would have to patch it. And that's what that bump out here is. That's where we'd be patching that up. But it was a lot of work to get there. And over time, the goal here has been first to increase what we can do with the PSF. So I've done a lot of work in adding new types of fix-ups, as well as extending the capabilities of the fix-ups within the package support framework, but also left shifting, trying to make this easier so that it's not as much work. So we've been doing this for a number of years at this point, and where do I draw this line now? Again, this is just Tim on a piece of paper, right? Come on. There it is. Okay, this is where I draw this today. You can tell I was actually drawing. It's actually easier to package with MSIX than even it was with AppV. We're doing so much more with automation and understanding what the application needs and getting it fixed up properly that it's easier than it was with the AppV sequencing for a bunch of apps. Let's call it 70%. We can do, and it's literally just a click of a button, fix the package up, and it takes care of it. We've got another, let's say 20%, that needs some work. This would be an application like GIMP. I put in the package support framework to solve a problem for the DLL not loading, and it doesn't solve the problem for that package because it was built as a multi-vendor package that was originally from Linux, and when they call to load their a particular DLL, they don't use the normal Windows developer library to make that call, which is the one that the PSF is tracking. They're actually using this really obscure Microsoft API that we don't know how to intercept with the PSF yet. And so it would break. But we'd have a fix for that. And we can fix it by we just move the DLL to where it is in the package, down into the VFS System32 folder, and that solves the problem for us. But we have to go through that with the app to figure it out. So that's why it takes a little longer for that second set of apps. It's just not automatic yet today, but we're getting better and better, and we're getting more under the curve altogether. And that's kind of where we stand as of this time right now. Okay, so how do we do that? Over the years, I've done a couple of different techniques. Originally, I was creating this tool called PSF tooling, and we'd use that in conjunction with the Microsoft packaging tool, but we were dependent on the Microsoft tool to actually create the MSIX package at the end. So Microsoft originally created a subset or a set of things, of capabilities that we would use in terms of this AppX manifest file that gets written in there that describes how that application should get integrated with the operating system. So all of the features like the shortcuts and the file associations and the shell extensions and the like. But they had very limited capabilities in those first years. But over time, they've been adding to that. Because from Microsoft's perspective, MSIX has been a dual-use technology. They want you to be repackaging into this format and start running your systems more safely. But they really want the developers to stop releasing an MSI and go into MSIX. And that process has been very, very slow because third-party developers don't build their software the same way that Microsoft builds their software. So when Microsoft built MSIX, they said, oh, if we're going to do something, we're going to build an app like this, we're going to have this thing over here, we're going to have this thing over, and they have a lot of modularity. And third-party vendors typically don't do a lot of that. And that's why a lot of their stuff didn't work. But Microsoft has been extending the schema set over the years, and we've been now taking advantage of it. What they haven't been doing is fixing up their own MSIX packaging tool to take advantage of the new schema sets. So eventually, I kind of had to stop with that method because I could only take it so far. And so we created a secondary tool called AppAttach. And so we just use their tool to just create a basic capture. Get me an MSIX package. That's okay. We'll take it from there. And so this tool will open up that package, and it'll look at all of the things that are in the package that shows exactly what the initial vendor install did to the system, how they were trying to integrate with the operating system. They were putting their shortcuts, their file associations, all of their COM stuff in there, the protocol handlers. And we analyze all that, and we look at the full capabilities that we can put in MSIX and sort of map all that stuff over and create a new package that has not only the package support framework where we need it, but also all of these other changes to take advantage of the full capability of what MSIX has to offer. Now, over the course of this year, and particularly this summer, I did a lot of work with the AppX manifest file to get past one of the really big bugaboo problems, which is that the way the AppX manifest itself was architected out, it was sort of backwards from the way that the original versions of the registry-based COM registrations happened. And we couldn't take everything that vendors had today and get it to fit inside that model. So I created a new PSF component, and I actually turned the AppX manifest file kind of up around its head so that we could get past all of these uniqueness rules and completion rules that they have within the schema sets and actually support more and more of the traditional COM things that these vendors were putting in their products to be able to bring them over. And that's having a lot of positive impact on our ability to get these applications to fully work to the 100% criteria that I like to use. So this is a graph I've also done here in the past showing sort of kind of over time how we've improved from the early years where we didn't have very much compatibility to the number from the MSIX report card, which is a PDF I release each year around the end of January that goes and it measures how good we are. And so I have, I think at this point, about 120 enterprise applications that I run through this full process and test them out and determine what kind of compatibility should you be seeing in your applications. And the number in last January's report was 82%, which I was really happy with. At the time, I had said in some of the tweets that I'm hoping that by the time I do this report again next year, I'll get it up to maybe 88%. And I was kind of worried about saying that, but I was also feeling pretty confident on what the things I was planning this year. I just ran a set of this, a preliminary test, on the 5.1 version that we released, I think, Monday this week. And that number looks like it's at 90% now. So we are definitely making some good progress. One of the great things with all the work I did this summer with the COM stuff is like take something like Adobe Reader. If you just packaged it up, you'd have somewhere on the order of 120 COM objects that we couldn't get into the AppX manifest file. With the changes I did this summer, we were able to get that number down to about 20. And what that means for me is that now I'm not looking at just a forest and trying to figure out what's wrong. I'm now looking at individual issues and saying, that's a maple tree. Let me figure out how to deal with a maple tree. I get that fixed, and now there's a bunch of apps that also have those maple trees in it. So over time, we're continuing to work this progress. And 5.1 included, I think, 4 new kinds of COM fixes that were those individual tree types to try to bring in some more of the package functionality. Okay. We'll see how demos go. I'm not a recorded demo person, but we'll see if I can make this work. So I want to show you how we actually do this using TM-editX. So we're going to start, we have a package. We do have some options. You can sort of configure how you want to do your packaging. Like I prefer to keep all desktop shortcuts out of the package. If you accidentally captured one, I'll take it out, but there's a checkbox to say not do that. So we open up the package, it runs the analysis, it's looking at what the application put down, what's needed here, and we've broken this into categories. But basically, when someone's using this tool, they're just going to go up and they're going to hit that all default fixes and just say, fix my package up. And there's even a command line switch that we can feed this in and use that for automation. I'll talk about it a little later. Another new piece that's in here this year is this analysis report that's now part of the package. So this is showing you at the top here all of the entry points for someone trying to run this application. Okay, I see that originally there was a shortcut here, there's a shortcut here, I had these file associations, I got these shell extensions, what kind of shell extensions? We can see context menus, drop and drop handlers. If there were protocol handlers, we'd see them there. That's the information you need to figure out how you're going to do a UAT test. Are you covering all of that? I mean, you don't necessarily need to cover 100% of that, but you at least need to be aware of here are the ways that users could interact with this application. The next thing, the files was showing what the recommended fixes were, and then all of the changes that were made as we fixed up this package, we're detailing them out. And a section at the bottom that this one doesn't have that says that, oh, by the way, there are these 2 things here that we don't know how to fix yet. And that can be a hint to, oh, maybe I need to do a little more testing on this package before we roll it out. Okay, then we save the package off and sign it. So that was a fairly simple app. I'm thinking that was 7-zip, I think it was, in here. And we're going to see a second package here, Adobe Reader, which is the one that I talked about earlier. So we're going to see when this thing runs the analysis, there's going to be an awful lot on the screen. And what shows up on the screen, so I have that button that just says, fix it for me. But we also have the individual things that you can go in and do these things by hand. So there's going to be a section at the top. It's going to be about package cleanup. All right, we see these files and registry things you probably don't need in the package. We'll clean them up. In this case, we're going to see that there's an uninstaller that was down as part of the package. Well, we want to remove that because the user's not going to be able to uninstall the package with that uninstaller. So those are things that we usually want to take out. We'll see applications that use squirrel updaters. And that's something that I would take out in the early phase before we get to the package support framework. So if we had one of those in here, we would take that out as well. Electron apps like the squirrel updaters, for example. So that's that top pre-PSF area there. And you can dig into the details and see what's there. There's a slim installer thing. You can then go in and add in the package support framework. So it's already figured out what components you need. So all you have to do is just say add it. There is a dialog if I went and clicked that button so I could fine tune it if I wanted to. And then in that recommended fixes, that's the last thing that the automated button will do. These are all of the things that have to get fixed up in this package because Microsoft didn't take care of any of that stuff. So in this case, we've got a bunch of shell right-click menus that they skipped. I see that there's a preview handler, which is something that you'd use in Explorer preview mode. The user can click on the file and just see the PDF document on the right-hand pane of Explorer directly. Then we have a ton of COM stuff that was missing in there. It was missing all of the fonts that the vendor put down, which would be more important for a thing like the PDF reader if it needs those fonts. The system will find a different font, but the document will look a little bit different, so you do want to have those fonts on there. And then there were, I didn't even see what the other things were in there. But, we just click this. It does have to go back and reanalyze the package after doing some of these things, so that's why you see a little bit of flashing there as it went back there. And we have these available fixes, and like that copy there, that's how I fixed that GIMP package I talked about. I would have to come in and click one of those buttons, and we just put that copy in there, and now the DLL gets found. So those are things you don't have to do very often, but that's how you get to the full 90%, is finding those packages, figuring out what's wrong, and coming back and doing this. So in addition to dealing with the MSIX format, the tool can also output to the AppAttach formats. So the VHD, the VHDX, and the SIMFS format. So folks that are doing particularly AVD, but also both Citrix and I want to say VMware. I don't want to say VMware. I want to say Omnissa. Omnissa have the ability to take advantage of the AppAttach format and use their management system to deliver those packages for those non-persistent environments as well. And that's where the converters are. All right, so I solved Sammy's problem. Apparently it was his shoes that was causing a connectivity thing that he would get shocked. All right, let me get to the next slide. Except Tim is incompetent in doing that, apparently. Come on. You're not even giving me a button to do that. Oh, yeah, that was showing the MSIX deploy. I should be showing that. I never showed this tool. I forgot to put it in here. So those of you who worked with my AppV stuff, I had a tool called AppVManage, which was a tool for after you've packaged it, the packager usually wants to test the package right away. And rather than get involved with management systems, this gave you a nice little tool. You could just say, hey, install it. But it also gave you debugging tools. This tool, it's part of TM-EditX, and it gives you the same capabilities for MSIX. And if I let that go, so here I just point it to a network share where my packages are. It's going to enumerate the packages. It's showing us, do we have the PSF and what components of the PSF are in there. That's what these green icons are in here. And then we can also see that analysis report, so we can go and just extract it out and take a look at that if we want to. And then after we right-click and install a package, then we can come in here and we have a right-click that'll allow us to do things like give me an Explorer window that is inside the virtual environment. So this is what the application would see. You can't actually browse to this location and explore. You have to know the path, so we just give you a button to do that. But we can also take a look at where the user data relocation area is. So you run the application and the user makes some changes. You want to be able to see where those are. We can see those there, the user data dir. But we can also look at the AppX manifest file that's in the package, the config.json file, which is what controls the package support framework. And then if we want to add programs within the container, we can start a command prompt or Windows terminal there. We can start a regedit, and that's running inside the container environment. So you're seeing exactly what the application would see in terms of that layered environment. These are some nice things. There's some other things in there I will use sometimes if I find, I should have really put in the environment variable fix-up. I forgot about that. And I could just add it in here from a test perspective, figure out if that solves my problem, and then go back and repackage it. So that's the purpose of this tool, is to help bring that along. And now he's going to not how to do that. You're going to give me a mouse that I can use? You're not. Usually there's supposed to be a button on this screen to go to the next slide, and it's missing today. I think Sammy did something. I would just let that run. Okay, let's start talking. Okay, so this week we've had some big announcements that have been going on as well that I want to talk about. So we're now getting to that point where we can do more and more of these applications. But application packaging is quite often more than just getting the package ready. And so there are some other vendors that are out here in the space. And I talked a little bit about them last year and saying, hey, you should keep an eye on that space. But today we announced three, let's see if I can click here and make it go. Here we go. Or yesterday, 3 different vendors are now including the ability to use TM-AppAttach in with their packaging solution. So AppCure, which is out of the UK, they're not here at this event. They're actually doing a Microsoft event in Dubai, so they couldn't be here. But they include it directly into their product. So they have their own packaging engine. They can do their own capture method, or they can use the Microsoft packaging tool behind the scenes to do the initial capture. But in either of those, and then they would then feed through to TM-AppAttach to fix up the package and have that fully automated. Jariba is here, and I will be speaking at Bob's session as well. I think it's at 1 o'clock. Bob Kelly, I think everybody knows in this industry. They've done the same type of thing. They've included it in their product, and they have a little bit different focus than all 3 of these guys have a different focus of what they're trying to solve for you, but it's all in the entirety of the application, preparation, and delivery land space. And finally, Remo 3, and 5 minutes, thank you. I'll be speaking with Josh, sorry, I lost his name for a second. Josh Travers, and I think that's at the 3 o'clock hour. They've done a similar type of integration. In the case of the first 2, when you buy their product, they're including the TM-AppAttach in it. In the case of Remo 3, they've put it into the workflow, and you'd come to us to actually buy the product if you wanted to do that. So that's sort of exciting news, and it's sort of what I've been seeing now as a little bit of trend. There's a survey that goes out every year called something about VDI, right? DAS, what is it called? DAS like a pro, yeah. And I understand that they picked up this year a tremendous amount of interest. So this is a survey that goes out to all of the IT folks. And the people that turned it in were getting very interested in MSI as a way to deliver the applications, much more than we've seen in the past. I think we're starting to see that trend that people are seeing that this is possible. We can now do these things. And I'm at a point where I've come here every year and I've said 2 things about MSIX. One is, it is the future of applications, and the second has sort of varied from, wow, this is not ready, to it's getting better, it's getting better, it's getting better. And this year, for the very first time, I'm ready to say that MSIX is ready to be the first choice for your packaging choices when you are packaging up new applications or repackaging stuff because you need to migrate away from things like AppV. And I believe it's ready now to be your first choice. You're still going to need a secondary choice. As I said, there is no packaging format that can do 100%, but it is ready, and I'm ready to really declare that starting now, October of 2024, is the year of MSIX. I think it's finally gotten around to be the point that it's ready to go. You know, I remember when Microsoft created AppV5. Right? We had AppV4.x for years and years. It was great. They came out with AppV5, and I went through that same process. You know, I went through with all of the beta stuff. I actually went to a meeting at Microsoft. We had a meeting of the MVPs. They brought us in, and they were really excited about this AppV5 thing. And we'd been working with it. And I went to that meeting, and we started introductions going around the room, and they asked us to say, what's the one thing you want to get out of this week? Or the weekend, sorry, it was the weekend. And I stood up and said, well, the one thing I want to get out of this weekend is I want to convince you not to release this product yet. I said, you know, based on your past history of releasing, this was in September, I said, you usually release the new version in January. And I said, I can tell you right now, this product is not going to be ready for the January release. Please hold off at least 6 months, if not a year, and get it right before you put it out. Well, the guy who was running the meeting stood up at the end. He was the last person because it was his meeting, right? He said, well, one thing that I want to do is tell you my first announcement for the day. We are now code complete, and release will happen in November. And they did. And what we told customers is, hey, this stuff will be great, but it's not ready for you yet. You know, start playing with it. Let Microsoft come out with a 5.1 and fix it up, and then it'll be ready. And then actually 5.1 didn't do it. We had to wait for 5.2, but it took them 3 years to get App v5 ready, that we were willing to say, hey, this is ready for you now to switch over and go to App v5. And it's been 6 years now with MSIX, but I think we're finally here. So that's what I had to say. I'd love to hear what you think about this during the breaks. And as I said, I'll be at Bob's session and Josh's session later today in one of those other rooms somewhere. Thank you.